Welcome to Stress-Free IEP. You do not need to do it all alone. With your host, Francis Shefter, Principal of Shefter Law. You can get more details and catch prior episodes at www.shefterlaw.com. The Stress-Free IEP video podcast is also posted on YouTube and LinkedIn, and you can listen to episodes through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and more. Now, here's the host of Stress-Free IEP, Francis Shefter.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. I am excited. I know I say that all the time, but this I'm really excited because Amanda Levin is here with us, and she is the founder of Neurospice Girls. And I'm excited because I know next to nothing about Neurospice Girls. So it's a new topic for me, and I'm learning something new, which I always love. So Amanda, tell us, what is Neurospice Girls?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Francis. So Neurospice Girls is a peer support and social club for moms of neurodivergent children in the greater Washington area. So we have a WhatsApp group, privately, a Facebook group, and we provide those sort of emergency resources that people might need. Just this past week, for example, we had some moms kind of crowdsourcing for medication shortage challenges, helping each other out. But also, I think it's important, in addition to having online communities that can help each other in those situations, also knowing each other in person and getting to, really recognize the moms you're talking to and their kids.
That is, so you are local.
Yes. Yeah. I'm in Gaithersburg, but the group, we have members actually from all over the greater Washington area, from up north as much as Baltimore to some folks in the greater Virginia suburbs of the area. Right now, about 250 members and growing.
Wow. And I know it's so important, as we talk about all the time. I was a mother myself of neurodiverse kids, just that support, like people that get it, right? I know for me, I feel like when I'm hanging with moms with neurodiverse kids, I don't feel like I ever need to explain behavior or anything else. And I never have to feel judged or somebody's going to say something, what's going to happen. And,
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, that's exactly the reason why I started the group. When my son was diagnosed with autism and ADHD, when we got that diagnosis, it was obviously a huge shift for our family, but looking to our family and our friend community, there really wasn't anyone going through this experience. So it felt extremely isolating, just because, these are major changes you're dealing with. You're talking about medication and potentially getting an education plan set up for school. So it's helpful to have people you can go to who've been through this experience before to sort of help guide you and support each other.
Yeah. Yeah. And friends and family don't get it. And I'm so tired of, well, if you parented differently, well, if you did this, if you did that, it's like, yeah, no, that doesn't work.
100%. I was actually I think we were both at this conference on pathological demand avoidance. And one of the things that I absolutely loved the most about the conference was, I think a speaker was saying exactly what you were saying, that we were all kind of shaking our heads at the same moments and groaning at the same moments and laughing at the same moments. So just to, feel like you're in an entire room of people, going through an experience that you are and are not denying your reality, I think is so important. And that was really my big takeaway from that event.
Yeah, I had the same thing. Like my takeaway was it was just nice to be in that energy of feeling support and not feeling judged, and that I could say anything. I could, say that my kid did X, Y, Z, and know that it's going to be okay, that nobody's going to judge me as a parent, or because that's what we get all the time, right? If you parented more, read this book, The Explosive Child is one that's always, which is a great book. And I agree 100%, but it's not always the solution,
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, from, my own family, before we kind of, before it sunk in, I think for them, of what we were dealing with, we constantly had, if you just did this behavior modification technique. Before my son was diagnosed, one of his school teachers had said, try 1, 2, 3 magic. And so we did, and it was a total disaster. And we've done, everything from the timers to the visual schedule. And I was kind of racking my brain, like, why are these supports not working? And in theory, you're supposed to work for children with ADHD and autism. And that's when I figured out the PDA diagnosis. It kind of mostly made sense to me that, oh, this is why those things aren't working, because you're dealing with this nervous system autonomy challenge. So then it kind of made a lot more sense.
Yeah, definitely. And if there's any listeners that don't know PDA, I mean, we've talked about it a lot, but you can look back in prior episodes. Diane Gould was on the show and talking a lot about it. She's the one that started the PDA North America, because that in itself is a whole nother topic.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
right. But, like we say all the time, if you've met one autistic child, you've met one autistic child.
Yes.
And what works, like as we know with PDA, like the schedules and the behavior modification, all that other stuff that works for classic kids with autism does not work for our PDAers. And I don't know if it's been your experience or not, but we'll find something that works and we'll stay consistent and it's working, and then boom, it doesn't work anymore, right?
Yes, that's probably the most frustrating part of all of it. Absolutely. But to go back to what you were saying about, people experiencing autism in different ways. When I first started Neurospice Girls, I recently did an article in our community newspaper, kind of spreading the word a little more. And part of it was just to educate people, because I think people have a version of autism in their mind, like everyone's Rain Man, so even when we were comfortable enough to tell certain friends and family about my son's diagnosis, they would say, but he looks at me, but he talks, and going through kind of these, in their Hollywood characteristics of autism. And so even that's been an education process for people to say, like, it's a spectrum. That's why they call it a spectrum, because, there are many different qualities you experience. And in our case, my son is a very high masker. So most of the challenges we've faced have not been at school. He's a great student. He can keep it together, so to speak, but at home was just a nightmare. And people who aren't in your home, don't understand that. So then they just are totally at a loss. Your kid's a perfect angel. Like, nothing's wrong. What are you talking about?
Yeah, that's an argument I have all the time with schools with finding the eligibility, because the first thing that schools like to do, that's a home problem, not our problem. We don't see that behavior. And it's like, because they're masking. And if they actually had the support in school that they needed for the sensory breaks, for the quiet time, for whatever that child needs, they'd be more regulated throughout the day.
Yes.
The good news is that I've found schools are starting to listen and understand and get it more. And it's more out there and people understand masking. And what I love seeing now is that IEP goals aren't trying to force kids to fit in. So the making the eye contact, to have quiet hands, so not stimming and stuff, and that's fine if that's what you want for your child. But some like, no, I want my child to be able to my child. If my child is not comfortable making eye contact with you, I don't want to force my child to do that, because why? It's the same thing as like giving a hug. If you're not comfortable giving somebody a hug, you don't force somebody to.
Well, absolutely. And I mean, even I hate to say this still even happens, but like, when I was pregnant, random people would try to come out and touch your stomach, and you're like, what the heck? So, I mean, it kind of happens in so many different contexts, but it's still totally not appropriate.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just, it's such a challenge. So you started Neurospice. When did you start it, and how did you come up with the name?
Yeah. So I started Neurospice Girls last September, and I've been, I'm a millennial person. So I've always loved the Spice Girls. They came around when I was in high school, college. And in the last few years, once my son was diagnosed, I had heard the term neurospicy, which I know there's controversy around that. But for me personally, I loved it, just because I think for me, neurodivergent is such a kind of nothing burger term. It can be an umbrella. And what does that actually mean? And I'm originally from Southwest Louisiana, so I love spice in my life. So I kind of view that as a positive attribute to what we're going through. So the combination of neurospiciness and neurospice being a more used term these days, plus being an older millennial of the Spice Girls generation, I just love a pun. So just putting it together just felt like so right for me.
Yeah, no, it totally works. The funny thing is I didn't even think about the Spice Girls. Well, I'm a little older, but but I knew who they were. I did know who they were. I knew some of their songs. But yeah, I mean, but I love that because it's fun. It's and it's catchy. It's I know there's so much controversy about the neurospicy and stuff because they think, and everybody's to their own, and that's okay. Where we should be in society of like respecting each other for what we prefer and don't prefer, and a simple correction. I know for me, well, not correction, but a simple, like, I prefer this
sure
over that, but I love it. And I think it's great. So I know, wow. So September 2024, you're started and you're up to 250.
Yeah, September 2024. So basically it just started out with, some moms I kind of knew in my, circles. And it's interesting because I don't know if you've experienced this, but, you kind of keep it as a close hold just because it's such a personal thing. But it's like if one person kind of shows that vulnerability, then it's sort of a signal to the person with you, like I can show that vulnerability. So I feel like now, I don't know if it's just because I'm doing this more, but a lot more people are very open with kind of, in just casual conversation. Once I bring up the topic, they bring it up too. So I think just even that small way of like building community and making people, know this is like a normal American experience that we're all dealing with and it's okay and you shouldn't feel shunned was critical for me.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that because I think about it all the time. Like, is it that society has become more accepting, or is it just that I've made my environment more accepting? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I think it's probably somewhere both, I mean, I just saw, we went to the movies with my kids the other day and there's some new movie coming out that's clearly about an autistic child. I don't know if you saw that preview, but I'm really pumped to see that, and I was thinking even as an event, maybe some neurospicy kids and moms, like we could all go together, just because, right.
I love that idea.
Now, right? I think we should do it. Yeah.
And I think we should all chip in and rent the theater. So it's just us.
Yes. I'm loving it.
Because that's the other thing, going to movies. When we saw the preview also, and my child that's on the spectrum, she's like, that's about a kid like me. We have to watch that, Mom, and is excited about seeing it because today, now they're starting to show more of the diversity in kids that are disabled, because a lot of times, like with Down syndrome, and I don't remember, I'm really dating myself, there was that show with the Down syndrome boy. And so that's what people associated. Yeah. And Rain Man, that's what people associated. And so now they're opening it more and more to the diversity within the diversity. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I haven't watched it, but I've heard about that great Netflix show, Love on the Spectrum. So I think it is having a much more accepting pop culture moment, as well as even more celebrities are kind of, revealing different things they're dealing with. Like Chris Rock came out with that he has a nonverbal learning disorder, and Bill Gates just recently came out and said that he thinks he's autistic, so it's really great to have these like very famous and positive role models, to say like they had these challenges as well and look how successful they are.
Right. That was one thing when I told my daughter about it, but when both my kids, I had them, I did neuropsychs on them, and because I knew there were issues, and I told them, like, the way I describe it is everybody's brain works differently, and we're just figuring out how your brain works so that we can figure out how you learn, how to teach you and stuff like that to be better. And so they, on their level, they understood that. And when we told my older one about the autism, she's like, well, so what does that mean? And, I explained it a little. And then I went into famous people that are on the spectrum. And one of the people is the gentleman that founded Pokemon.
Oh my gosh, I didn't
I
even know.
know. And my daughter was totally into Pokemon at the time.
Right.
So like she is so ecstatic of like, now I understand why I like Pokemon, you know, like and the making that connection and not feel, because we're very open about it. We're very, I mean, obviously we're not going screaming it, you know, but and I always have that pull of it's her thing to tell, is it my thing to tell? But I have the conversations with her. I say that I've talked about her on the show and she's
Yeah.
okay with it. But
Right. Yeah. I mean, we definitely had that challenge, you know, when to tell our son. And I remember we had a 504 meeting at the end of the school year 2 years ago. And we asked, you know, when do you think the appropriate time would be to tell them? And they said, well, actually, you know, we had at his school, Rachel Carson, they had Neurodiversity Week, which was news to me. And they said, you know, they were educating all the kids about different types of neurodivergence. And in my son's classroom, when they started talking about autism, one kid said, I have autism. And I think, had briefly, you know, told Asher about his diagnosis. And he goes, I have it too. And the other kid goes, no, you don't. And, you know, again, talking about like their own perception of, you know, the spectrum of what it is. So I thought that was kind of funny. And when I came out with this article in our neighborhood newspaper, this was sort of like our big kind of coming out, so to speak, that people, you know, were not aware. So I wanted to ask my son beforehand to get his permission. And, you know, he was very sweet about it and very earnest. And he said, oh, I want everyone to know about autism. And by the way, are we going to be on the cover? And I said,
I love it.
I said, no, not this time, you know, maybe some other time. But yeah, so he's all about promoting autism awareness.
And that's where my daughter is also with it. She's very, and that's why I feel more comfortable now talking about it, because I have her permission. She's like,
Right.
you know, she wants to go and, you know, find to support why is my brain not functioning? Companies that support autism, you know, like Autism Speaks and Pathfinders for Autism and X Minds and all that other stuff. She totally wants to support and be involved in that stuff, because she now identifies and understands it more. And I don't know, like I can't get this movie out of my head because it was so phenomenal, Out of My Mind. So not last, I think it was 2 weeks ago, Lisa was on it about AAC devices, and it's about a girl that has cerebral palsy and is nonverbal, and about her communication challenges because the board she had didn't have the words she was looking for.
Oh,
And she wasn't able to. So, and then she gets it. It's amazing. And then her mainstreaming in the classroom, it's absolutely amazing. My kids loved it. Both my husband and I cried. You know, it was one of those type of movies. But it was eye-opening because my daughter was like very, if I see somebody like that, I'm going to go up and talk to them, you know, because so often when we see kids with wheelchairs or nonverbal or this or that, I see parents shy away with their kids. And I get it, because you don't know what to say. You don't know how to say, but guess what? Hi works just fine.
Right. Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think that oftentimes the moms in my group, as far as even, you know, telling people about their child's diagnosis, they're exactly worried about what you're saying. You know, are they going to be viewed differently, or, you know, will people kind of back away? And I always tell them, you know, if that's what they do, then they weren't meant to be your friend anyway, kind of situation. So 100%
Exactly.
on that.
Yeah. If you're not going to accept me, my family, the way we are, then okay, don't, you know, and that's okay. I do have to say, it's been interesting with my family and my husband's family, and seeing their relationships with my children go now that they know the diagnosis and know where it is, and how they're a little more accepting, you know, and friends too, which I mean, behavior is behavior, but it's not, once people understand the diagnosis and that this is not a choice behavior, you know, like when my child gets dysregulated and cusses me out and tells me I'm the worst parent in the world, I don't react anymore because I know it's not true.
Right.
But she just, that's all she can think of, it to get out and get frustrated and get her out of that situation. And then she goes and runs and hides. And then of course she's then texting me on her, you know, thing of like, mommy, can you come give me a hug? You know? But it's like, I know I've seen my friends and family like go into shock that I'm allowing my child to speak to me like this. And I'm like, because what, yelling and punishing her for being dysregulated, what is that going to do? How is that
Yeah.
going to help?
100%. No, I mean, I think until you go through this yourself or you are a provider in this field, like, why would you sort of have to understand it? And so I think the same thing for, my family and friends as well. Now that they know me and they know his diagnosis, and we've spent the time to try to educate people more, I think, that leads to much more understanding and patience, especially with like the parenting challenges, like you said, like if your kid is just doing something that doesn't seem right and then they want to intervene or do a traditional parenting behavioral modification technique and you're just rolling your eyes like not going to work.
Yeah.
So I definitely agree with you on that one.
Yeah. And it's like, I'm not letting her get away with it. That I hate when people say that, like, I would have been backhanded. I'm like, yeah. And how did you feel about that? And like, the things that our parents used to do, which, as I always say, they did the best they could with what they knew. And I don't blame them at all. But like thinking back to when you were a child and your parent did that to you, how did you feel? Do you want your child to feel like that? And I say all the time, I'm not letting her get away with it. I'm letting her re-regulate, and then we'll have a conversation about it.
Well, right. I mean, because if you try in that moment, I mean, they're not listening. They're not able to listen. And that's something I have to remind myself just because I'm such a fixer kind of person. And I want to have, and my son has always been extremely verbal beyond his age. So, I'm able to basically have adult conversations with him, but also I have to keep remembering he's a kid. And especially in those dysregulation type moments, just totally unreachable. So it's like, just stop talking. Like, I just need to kind of keep reminding myself that.
Yeah, exactly. And that, I've done a lot of growth personally as a person parenting a neurodiverse child, because it's also a lot of soul searching and a lot of, me realizing how my reactions are making things worse or making things different, or, and that if I can get myself neutral, it helps. And also apologize. Like, I mean, there was an incident, I'm thinking back, and I think this was even before we had her diagnosis, but we were at one of the resorts, and she wanted to go downstairs to the pool barefoot because she didn't like any of her shoes. She only wears one type of sneaker, and her flip-flops were not comfortable, and she wanted to go downstairs barefoot. And in my head, that's against the rules. We can't let her do this.
Right.
And so it became a big fight. And then I think I went downstairs with my younger one, and my husband texted me and just like, she won't put on shoes. I'm like, you know what? Bring her down, let her come barefoot. And I told her, I said, you know what, honey, mommy was wrong. I said, because technically you're not supposed to, but you know what? That's how you wanted to come down and that's how you were comfortable. Then you can do it. Not that it's okay to break all rules, but this is a rule that, you know what? If we bend it a little, it's okay.
100%. I mean, you just have to pick your battles. Like,
Right.
What's the hill you're going to die on? I mean, talking about shoes, I'm having that exact challenge right now as well. It's about to snow today. It's like, 30 degrees. And for whatever reason right now, we're into wearing our Spider-Man sandals. Now, granted, I can get socks on too, but I mean, they're open toe, open heel. So it's like not very supportive to play, on the playground outside or, great for the weather. So I'm just hoping the school is not like, oh, this parent is failing miserably because their kid is not like weather appropriate. But yeah, that's just where we are right now. Spider-Man sandals.
And so when Hannah was in kindergarten, and again, this was before the diagnosis, she had this one pair of sandals and that's all she would wear. And again, like, what am I going to do? Fight with my child for an hour to put other shoes on that she's going to take off in a second anyway, because she's old enough to do that. And so, so it was fall, it was starting to get colder. And I talked with her kindergarten teacher, and her kindergarten teacher was phenomenal. Still teaching. But like, we came up with a plan of that she always wanted to play on the big kid playground because their school has the kindergarten playground that's fenced.
Mhm.
And then there's the big kid playground, which they can play on sometimes when there's not the big kids there. And so her teacher and I devised the plan of when she wore closed-toed sneakers, they would go out on the big kid playground. And boom, that worked. Because for her now, especially with the PDA, she had a reason why, and there was the motivation. It wasn't, you have to do this because of this. And so now it
Yeah.
was her making that choice, right?
Yep.
That's huge.
100%.
And it's so, with her, like there's only one type of socks that she'll wear and only in a certain color and one type of shoes. And, we're getting there. But again, it's why try to force her, choose your battles, which any parent will, parenting anything will tell you of like, is it worth it? It's just when we have neurodiverse kids, there's a lot more battles to choose from.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and I think that's the challenge is neurotypical parents like don't realize exactly what you're saying. Like literally everything is a battle. I mean, I can look and see some friends who, when they tell their kid, okay, it's time to go, it's like one time, and then the kid immediately follows. Whereas, in our house, we've got to do like a 10-minute warning, a 5-minute warning, and even with that situation, the transitions, if we're doing something fun, like playing Fortnite, and then we're going to go to soccer practice, even though we love soccer practice, it's still really hard to break away. That's something I feel like from morning to night, there are little battles, and you just, like you said, have to kind of pick which ones you're going to die on that hill.
Right, exactly. And I love that you say that. It's like, some families, you can just say it once and it happens. I'm like, yep. And that's the way it was in my house too when I was growing up. And I'm trying to think back, and I don't know if it was necessarily fear or not, but like, there was certain things, if you didn't do what mom and dad said, there were punishments and there were consequences. And where I get that, and that's what it was back then and stuff, for me, I have strong-willed children, and I like that. What I have said all of the time is that the characteristics my children have now are great for an adult. They just suck on a 7 and a 10-year-old,
Right. I mean, society.
But I don't want to break that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, school as it is and society generally is, like fit into a square box, and these kids are round, and, so,
Yeah.
but, I mean, yeah, I always say to people when we're having these, little battles, or, when I was a kid, or my husband, like we would never, after our parent had said, do whatever, come back and say no. Like, I mean, it was just
Right.
unimaginable to me. So like to experience this myself, it's just like, oh my goodness, like this is a real challenging situation. So you just kind of have to roll with it, and
Right.
kind of realize like we're in a different time and place, and different, neurotypical versus neurodiverse. So you just kind of have to be super flexible, which is really hard for me. So
Yeah.
do you find that hard as well?
It is definitely harder for my husband, but that's where I was saying a lot of personal growth for me
Yeah.
is because it is like I'm the mommy. That's why, that's what I grew up with, because, that's what it is. And I don't need to give you a why. And so now I have to take the step back and understand, like, forcing them to follow rules because those are the rules is making my child, I don't want to say a rule follower, because obviously I want my child to be a rule follower, but I also want my child to push back against authority a little bit.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
why do we have to do that? What's the reason behind it? And I'll tell you, their questions of why have me take a step back and think, like the thing with the shoes. Why? Okay, because you're afraid of injuring yourself. Okay, she's willing to take that risk. Then she's willing to take that risk. You know what I mean? Like that's to think out and figure it out with them of like, why are certain rules there? What's the safety and what's the reason? Like, okay, I understand that rule. I'm going to do it.
Yeah. I mean, 100%. I think there are a lot of rules, that can be very arbitrary. So like you said, in that way, it's good that they're questioning that. And, in our society we're living in, I think it's important to continue to question authority. And I've always said with my son and his, pushing back and all of that, like, I hope he uses these skills to be like this amazing, like business shark guy or a corporate
Yeah.
attorney. Cause like, otherwise, like, what was this all for?
Yeah. And that's the thing. And it's learning the skill and yeah, to give that pushback, the why, all of that. Like I'm so trying to avoid cookies. So for those that don't know, I'm a cookie mom. And it's amazing for me, like with the watching her grow with the, with the autism and being able to be out there and sell. And I don't know, I just like, there's one incident that came back that somebody was nasty to her and it sent her in a spiral downward and she went under the table, but her friend was able to pull her out and stuff. And it just makes me think about like how that skill she's learning of being able to take the no and being able to handle people being nasty, is such an important skill because, and that's everything we're teaching them, right? Like question authority. It's okay to question authority. There are some things that we're not going to question. And no, it's not an option you must do, like wearing, being in a car seat or wearing your seatbelt, certain things. But the other things like why is it not okay for me to do this? Why do I have to do that? And I want my kids to be those kids, those adults.
Sure.
Like, I mean, why? Rethink it.
So I grew up, and my husband grew up being extreme rule followers, and I think one sort of fear, and I've seen this in other like online channels that I follow, is, if you're giving in or, like if they can't handle the no, like how is that preparing them kind of for the real world and, the rules. But what I like to take to heart is the pushback, I guess, is you are helping them re-regulate. So as they get older and they experience those no's, they're able to sort of handle it in a more, healthy and positive way when those challenges come.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the growth I love seeing. And them, there was something else I thought of. I gotta remember to write stuff down because things come in the head and then they go away. My husband likes to say I had a thought, but it died of loneliness. Right? So, but yeah, I mean, it's like our kids growing and seeing it, like I love it because it makes me question things too. And that's what it was I was thinking of, is that the why, like, why do we do that? And it goes back to the story of the making the pot roast. And the kid asked mom, why do you cut off the ends? And the mom's like, I don't know, because that's how we always did it. So she called her mom. Mom, why do we cut off the ends? I don't know. That's how your grandma always did it. Called the grandmother. Mom, why did you cut off the ends? Because it wouldn't fit in the pot.
Oh,
right? So like the whole thing is we've always done this because that's how it was done. But when you look back to the why it was done originally, it doesn't make sense anymore. We have a bigger pot.
Right. Yeah. There was a good reason at the time. And then everyone just kept rolling with it. Yeah.
Right. Because that's how grandma did it. When she taught me how to do it, you cut off the ends and, and that's so like for me, like I always think back to that as like, I want my kid to ask why, like, why don't you do this? Why do we have to do that? It's frustrating. I get annoyed as heck because answering why, just because I said so, we got 5 minutes to be out the door. Let's just go, but it's learning. And I love that because that gives their thirst for knowledge.
Sure. Absolutely. But it is challenging in the school setting. I'm sure, as you know, with your job, I've found, especially with my son, I mean, he's been very low need as far as supports and things. But when we got the PDA diagnosis, we specifically, did not mention that at school just because we know, that's something that is currently not accepted in the school system. So I think that's sort of the one area where, you want to foster this sense of questioning and stuff, but then you meet all these roadblocks along the way of kind of people saying fit in the box. So I'm sure, it's frustrating for me, and I'm sure with your work every day, it's just like,
Yeah. I want to say, so you say within the school system, and that's not 100% true. Because with the PDA, how I learned about it, it was a couple of years ago, and I had a client, and I was able to get, and I have in other schools as well, but able to get the PDA language put on the IEP.
Okay, well, maybe it's just my school's not the best on that.
No, there's definitely schools that we have to fight with it, but like, at least, the autism, obviously it can't be a code, but it can be in the description. It can be later on, and getting the language of, giving choice and non-direct and, all the other things that we need. I've been able to get those supports on the IEPs. Some schools better than others. I mean, I had a school like, oh yeah, we did a whole training on PDA, and right, I know. I know. I'm like, all right, how do I get my kid to that school? But it was great. It was fabulous. But it's still, our schools aren't set up to handle kids with PDA, no matter how much you know about it. And we know that. It's even a challenge for our kids on the spectrum a lot of times, because I don't want to limit it there, all of our neurodiverse kids, because the problem is what do they need? And there's so many kids in that gap that need the high intense academic levels, but need the smaller setting because they can't handle the 30 kids in a class.
Right.
And that doesn't exist.
Right.
And the way the law is written, if you can't handle the big class, that means you need more special education and pulling you away from your neurotypical peers more, which is not what our kids need.
Right.
And so it's that battle of, well, so how do we fix it? What do we do? Because not everybody can afford private school.
Sure. I mean, I think this is, a struggle the moms in my group are always talking about is, oh, I have this 504 IEP meeting coming up, like any advice, or do you have particular language you're using? And that's why, it's just one of the many resources that Neurospice Girls, what I love is just this community support of sharing, this worked for me, or this doesn't work, or talking about different schools, what's the best school in this area for, my kid, or have you heard about this school? What do you know? That's exactly sort of the purpose that I was trying to find in starting this, and even having a venting space. I mean, I would say over the holidays, the chat was just going nuts, because of holiday dynamics of, Uncle Jimmy keeps saying, why won't he come sit at the table? Or why, are they playing video games? It's so rude, that kind of thing. And just the general stress of not having a schedule, during the holiday season with kids. So I think it's just really important. And I'm so grateful for, the women in the group that we can all support each other in these like really trying moments.
Yeah, no, I love, yeah, it's so true. It's so, because we need that support. And I love that it's more open, that people are more open. But again, like, is it that people are more open, or is it the community I've made around me? But I'm just grateful that I've built my community, that I can talk and be open. And, there's one family, they started out as a client, they're friends now. I love hanging out with them. Our kids get along great in their own ways, but it's like, I love going out with them because we get it.
Yes.
I don't feel judged by them. We both let our kids, we don't feel like we need to correct, let our kids do what our kids are going to do, and it's okay. And everybody at the restaurant might be staring at us, but I don't care. That's the biggest thing that's changed for me, is like, I don't care what anybody else thinks.
Right.
Their problem.
Yeah, I think that's important until you find that community. It does feel like everyone's staring, judging, whatever. So to find people who are having these exact experiences as you are, like, for my kid, he's got to have the switch at the table, or like, the dinner's going to go like way off the rails kind of situation. So, even providing advice to each other about, what can we have in our like goodie bag, so to speak, to like keep them entertained, and, what food are they going to have? Like, it's really amazing kind of the different hats, like as a mom just normally you face, but then as a mom of a neurodivergent kid, it's just like, that much more epic as far as, like, I feel like I'm always doing 3D chess as far as situations, that we're running into, or like trying to think through, like, how is he going to handle a potential change or disappointment is like such a real thing that we're constantly dealing with.
Yeah. And I know for me, having anxiety about doing, like, last time we flew, it was getting on the airplane was a challenge. And it was bad. It was really, like, to the extent that I didn't know what I was going to do. But thankfully but now like I'm flying alone with the girls in March, and I'm like, so I'm trying to keep my anxiety down of like, okay, what did we do last time that I think triggered that, so I can get all of that in place so that this time, now mind you, we've flown, I can't tell you how many, 3 round trips a year since she was born, but this one time is giving me that anxiety because okay, that is a possibility. So what do we need to do to prevent it? And people don't think about that, right?
The airport is stressful enough,
Exactly.
like with kids. So, right, like having to game this out. I don't know if you've used, though, at DCA now, they have those sunflower lanyards, which are a visual sign of someone with neurodivergence that may need more assistance. So I think in theory, if you have that lanyard, they will like put you in a faster line to get through security, or you can board early. I'm not sure if it's at all DC airports, but it's certainly at Reagan. So that's something to know. And it's at the information desk when you're, hanging out in the airport. You can just grab that before you get into the security line.
Interesting. I mean, I have Clear and I have TSA now because I'm like, I'm not dealing with this. I don't care how much it costs, like, so we zip through anyway. But yeah, I mean, it's funny though, because she's like, well, I want to take off my shoes then. I'm like, so take them off. You don't have to, it's like, if you want to, go for it, kid, but it's, it's funny. So, oh my gosh. So for anybody listening is like, oh my gosh, I found my people. How do I join? What do I do?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you can find us on Facebook. We do have a private group, Neurospice Girls. We also have a intake form. So if you join on Facebook, you'll get a prompt to fill out the intake form. And that way I can get your email address and phone number, and you can opt in to getting emails about our events and opt in to joining the private WhatsApp chat. We do monthly events, and our next upcoming one is next Saturday. It's going to be a free salsa class at Salsa with Sylvia, followed by a lunch at Tacombe in Bethesda, right, very close nearby. So, I think the key thing that's important also is because moms are really carrying so much of this burden, it's to, try to carve out what little space you can for the self-care. So I try to do, a variety of different types of events. This one, in this case, is like more of a purely social event, but we also do educational ones. And in March, we're doing one with Karen Starobin about neurotypical and neurodiverse siblings and their relationships, and, how to foster positivity between each other and knowing all the struggles you deal with. And of course, the one we're doing with you in April about what the schools aren't telling you about IEPs, which I'm so excited about. So if you go to our website, neurospicegirls.net, you can also see all the events that are upcoming.
And I think I need to come to the one in March, because that is definitely an issue with my siblings, my 2 little ones. So you just said you do member events. So those are all just moms though, right?
Just moms. Yeah. We just want to have a space, because we just want a space for like moms to be able to vent about, oh, my partner is not on the same page with me, or my mom, or whatever. I mean, there are definitely spaces, I think, in other places for, other groups, but just specifically just because I'm a mom and wanted to have that shared experience with moms, that's why it's limited in that way.
No, and that's great. I love it, because it is. We need moms sometimes, and we don't want the husbands, the dads, the significant others there, and we don't want the children there sometimes too.
Right. And that's exactly it. I mean, most of the events I do are just for the moms, but I'm constantly taking feedback, and we are planning to do in June an event with moms and kids together. So, we'll have those opportunities, but for the most part, I want to foster that break for the moms to, have a little bit of time to themselves and to meet moms, socialize, kind of have that understanding of going through the same experience, and hopefully doing something fun as well.
Yeah. Except for the other event that we might be planning, because we will talk after this to rent out the movie theater.
Yes,
that's such a great idea.
I need to find out when that movie's coming out. Yes.
Yeah, and then we can have our kids there and not worry about, and we can have them do the lower lights and the lower sounds, so the sensory we don't have to worry about. And
and if they get up, a few times,
none of us care.
We're in a whole theater of people that get it. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, we'll have to figure that one out. So this has been so awesome. And I'm just like noticing the time and I'm like, okay, this is another one of those ones that I could have kept. I think we could talk for hours.
Yes.
But I know we all have 1 o'clocks and this has been just so awesome and so great. And I know we'll have all the links when we officially, this is live now. We'll have all the links in the show notes so that people can join and find you easily. But this has been so awesome, Amanda. Thank you so much for being a guest.
Thank you so much. Have a great one.
You've been listening to Stress Free IEP with your host, Frances Shefter. Remember, you do not need to do it all alone. You can reach Frances through shefterlaw.com, where prior episodes are also posted. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, and sharing the show with others through YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and more.